A night. The fog settled into the pines. It felt like someone had closed a hand around the world and tightened. The air in the clearing hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and cold resin. My breath came out in shallow white ghosts. I told myself I was being careful, checked my packs, the little weight of the radio, the sliver of flashlight beam. But the truth was simpler and more stubborn. I had been here because something about being alone in the woods made everything else seem smaller, more bearable. That's where the 3 stories begin, each a different edge of the same dark. If you enjoy these kinds of true-feeling horror stories, stay until the end, subscribe, and drop a like. If you've had your own brush with something that shouldn't have been there, tell it in the comments. I used to work the night shift in a county hospital that had been patched and repatched for 40 years. The wing I was assigned to my first month, Eldon, they called it, smelled like lemon cleaner and old flowers. It had an attic accessed through a metal trapdoor in the linen closet, the kind of place where dust collected like a second ceiling. I was 24, stretched thin by study and shifts, convinced that proving myself meant staying late, checking the corners that others left alone. The first time I saw her, I thought she was a hallucination from exhaustion. She stood at the far end of the ward, where the fluorescent lights didn't quite reach. I had walked past that bed twice, read the chart, handed off medications, and never seen her. Then, on my 3rd pass, her head turned. She was small, no older than 10, wrapped in a hospital blanket like a shawl. Her hair was wet against her face, which was pale in a way I could feel more than I could see. She didn't make a sound. In the hush of that long night, the only things that moved were my pulse and the ventilator that kept a different patient breathing. "Hey," I said, because it felt like the only word you can offer a child who won't speak. The blanket shifted. The girl blinked, slow and precise, and when she looked at me, her eyes were the wrong color of old photographs. Flat and too still. She held something in her hand, a locket, brass dulled by time. I had seen that locket before. I had emptied the lost and found basket last week and sorted through a host of plastic trinkets and lost gloves. That particular locket had been faded into nothing, but the chain caught on a hook in my memory like a hair on a comb. "Where did you get that?" I asked. The ward hummed. The monitors kept time. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she put the locket into my palm. It was cold, colder than the blankets, like it had been kept under a stone. When I opened it, there was a photograph tucked inside, grainy, a boy with a gap-toothed smile who might have been a patient once, or a brother. I didn't know him, but the hospital did. Names live in places like that. They stay behind wallpaper and in the scratches on floors.
Destes sinais eram nas cortinas, nas marcas do chão.
There is uma particular clarity in ruins, the way silence seems to gather and store every step you take. My girlfriend Natalie called me reckless. She also held my hand in the dark while I tried to be brave. We were 23 that summer when we found Godfrey Hospital. Half a day's drive and a wrong turn from anywhere with a town name. The place lay in a shallow bowl of trees, its windows black mouths, its brick husk eaten in places by ivy. The rusted sign at the entrance read Godfrey, in letters of a hospital font someone had used too often and never bothered to remove. We went because of two things: curiosity and the thrill of seeing the world when everyone else had gone home. Our flashlights cut small holes in the dark. The main lobby smelled of mildew and the sweetness of old antiseptic. A soda machine leaned like a tired statue against the wall. The elevator hadn't worked in decades. We moved through corridors like trespassers at a funeral. For the first hour, it was the usual stuff: graffiti, pigeon nests, rooms with single beds and rusted wheelchair frames. Then we found the staircase. It curled down like a finger. A draft chased us with the insistence of a living thing. Natalie gripped my sleeve. "This is probably dumb," she whispered, "the way someone says a prayer when they don't want to say a prayer." I told her it wasn't dumb. I told her it was a story. The basement was not a space for stories. It was a cathedral of humming pipes and a smell like old socks and concrete. Down there, the light flickered blue, the kind that looks like a cold bruise. We heard, before we saw anything, the scratch of something at the far wall. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't a drip. The sound had rhythm, like fingers tracing a line in callus. Natalie squeezed my hand until I felt the bones tighten. We rounded a corner, and there it was. A figure at the end of the hall, smaller than a man, moving with purpose, but without the clumsy gait of flesh. It turned its head toward us, and for a heartbeat I thought, absurdly, that it was a mannequin. Until it spoke. The voice was wet and low, a murmur that filled the concrete like water. "Jake," it said. The word wasn't a sound so much as a recognition, a thing that landed in the hollow of my chest. My name in a place where no one should know it. My heart hammered. I didn't remember enough of anything to run cleanly. The brain scrambles and leaves you with instincts, legs first, shout second. We bolted. Natalie pulled me, nails clicking against the railing, breath tearing in the dark. Behind us, something pursued. Not in the stump and approach way of a person, but with the soft, uneven pacing of something that could fill space with silence and then take it away. Our flashlight beams cut erratic arcs across the walls, and sometimes caught nothing, sometimes caught the suggestion of fingers pressed to a window from the other side. We made a bad decision by breaking into a maintenance room to hide.
Bad decisions have a way of focusing you. We crouched, shoulders pressed to the cool metal, listening to the hall for the sound of footsteps or the click of a lighter. The door had a gap under it. Through that strip of dark, I saw a shadow pass. It paused directly in front of the maintenance door. Something breathed near the air vents, a shudder like a sigh. Then it spoke again, softer, almost tender. "Natalie," it said, and the name came out like a child's careful pronunciation of a favorite toy. The voice used our names with the intimacy of someone who had watched us. It knew us as if our lives were pages in a book on a shelf. The practical thing to do was to climb out a window and run for the car. The human thing, stupid and beautiful and stubborn, was to stay and see. Natalie shook her head. "Jake," she mouthed. We were 23. Pride is cheap and death is expensive. We chose to go. There was no graceful escape. We slipped, skidding on powdery tile, grabbed railings that shuddered under our hands, and at one point my shoulder collided with something soft and wrong. I felt a grip, not strong enough to stop me, but precise, like the hand of a person who remembered the shape of you. That contact lasted a breath and a lifetime. We burst out into the lobby, lungs burning, and didn't look back until we were in the parking lot, leaning on the hood of the car as if it were a makeshift island. The thing about running with adrenaline is that the world sharpens in edges. I remember every sound, the click of my keys, the distant slap of a loose sign in the wind, the hiccup of Natalie's laughter when she realized we were both alive. But some part of the hospital stayed with us. For weeks afterward, I would catch a glimpse of movement at the edge of my vision, something that knew the angle of my shoulder. When my phone lit up, I would half expect my name to appear in the caller ID, spelled by itself, or to hear that soft, wet voice say what I'd always feared, that it was still learning to call in new ways. We never went back. People like us tell the story in the retelling, trading the fright for applause or a thrill. In the quiet of my apartment, on nights when the trees scrape like fingernails against the window, I would sometimes hear a whisper that wasn't really there, a syllable folding into my name. It didn't come from anything living as far as I could tell. It came from the woods, from broken hospitals, from gaps in old things. It was a thing you could not bargain with. It was a thing that remembered names. My name is Tom. I own a house off a 2-lane road that people use to get wherever they're going. It's a small house with a porch and a coat rack by the door, the kind of place that learns your habits. I like the way the moon bleeds through the trees in winter, and the way the radiator clunks like a tired animal when the brass valve opens.
Sometimes the phone will ring and you won't pick up because not answering feels like a small victory. Once, driving past the place where the pines thinned and the road dipped, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing between the trunks, pale and impossible. It turned its head toward me and saw me, and when it said my name, it sounded like the house had learned how to speak. I have learned small things about survival when names are used against you. Keep bright lights on more than you want. Tell people where you are. Tell someone if the voice knows your childhood address or the name your mother used to call you in the backyard before dinner. Believe in the plausibility of small comforts. Locks, friends who bring casseroles, the way a dog will chase what men cannot. The thing that knows my name keeps its promises. For now, the calendar day it spoke of still has months to arrive. For now, I have lights and locked doors, and a photograph that I have placed in a drawer and do not open. Sometimes I think of the girl in the hospital, and how her release was a gentle, private thing. Sometimes I think of Jake and Natalie's sprint and the way adrenaline stitches your memory into a rope. Sometimes I think of my own slow erosion. The woods keep their own hours. They collect names like leaves. You can run from them for a little while, drive away, turn your back, close your door. But names are small hooks, and shadows are patient. The thing that isn't an animal is not bound to the laws we trust. It calls you by the shape of yourself and waits for answers like an old friend. If you leave something behind, an object, a whisper, a memory, it will hold on to it, and in time, it will learn how to say the words that split you open. Tonight, the wind is a hand on the window. In the trees, something moves that could be branches. But in the distance, sharp and clear as a coin tossed into a well, a voice says my name, and the world trembles just enough to remind me that hearing your own name is not always a comfort.